Okay. How you guys doing? It's me, Black Mufasa, and welcome to episode 2 of Let's Talk About It. Now, yesterday's episode, it was kind of an introduction, me just kind of getting my feet wet and just figuring out something to talk about. And I told you that today it will be a little more structured. So I kind of figured out what I want to basically talk about. And in today's episode, as the title implies, I want to talk about the changes that they're looking to implement to jobs on Final Fantasy XIV. Again, it's a game that I play quite often. I've been playing it for about 8 years. And I seen this article and I decided that I definitely want to talk about this because I don't really understand why they're being so reactive so soon into the expansion. The expansion's only been out for about a week. You know, if you include early access, it's literally been out for a week. And even if you don't look at early access, you just look at the official launch. The game's been out less than a week. If you look at the official launch, which was Tuesday, and they're already looking to make changes to Viper, one of the new classes. One of two new classes. You have Viper, then you have Pictomancer. And I played the Viper class. I'm currently level 97. And I think the class plays just fine. I like the class a lot. It's fast paced. It's busy. It does great damage. And I don't really see what the changes need to be for that class. Any issues that I think players have with the class mostly probably deals with, if I had to guess without even really going into the article, but if I had to guess, it probably deals with its positionals, which with positionals, there's two options you have with it. You can either use True North, which completely removes the need for positionals for a set time, or you can just ignore them. Now, granted, I wouldn't advise ignoring positionals because you lose out on damage, but whenever you deal with a class that has positionals, like Ninja has a couple positionals, Dragoon has a couple positionals, Monk has a couple positionals. Whenever you deal with classes that have positionals, you typically just need to either like I said, use True North or learn your positionals. Just know where to be whenever you go to perform certain techniques and skills. That's basically all it is to it. This is not a new thing, but for some reason, this seems to be an issue. At least that's what I'm getting from this article, just the little bit I read. I just basically read the title. So we're going to look at that and we're going to talk about it. So let's go ahead and look at this. And the article basically states, Dawn Trail players are baffled by proposed changes to Viper, a job that has existed for less than a week, and honestly, so am I. Personally, I am too. Again, I'm 3 levels away from hitting level cap. I haven't had any issues with the class outside of careless errors that I myself have made. But as far as like the damage, as far as like learning positions and stuff like that, it's not hard. So I don't understand this. But let's read it. So Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail's been out for a week at the time of writing. This is including the early access period, which is mostly symbolic and there to split the server load up. In that time, Square Enix has already been quick to promise a glut of job adjustments following player feedback as posted to its news site yesterday. Among those changes, game director Naoki Yoshida, Yoshi P, is investigating what can be done for the poor Viper, one of the new melee combat jobs for the expansion, a vicious warrior that wields twin blades, sometimes gluing them together like Darth Maul. That's fun. We've received feedback pertaining to the business of their skill rotation. To that end, we're planning several improvements, including the easing of directional requirements and changes to the effects of several actions, Yoshi P writes. Now, this is the part I don't get. In fact, I actually have the game pulled up. So, real quickly, I'm going to go log into the game just to get a better idea of this. So right now, that's my warrior. Which, by the way, yesterday I was saying Warrior was boring. I started playing Warrior yesterday after I got on stream, and I played him a little bit today. I hit 95. Warrior feels, I don't know why, but Warrior feels different this expansion, and I'm actually enjoying my leveling experience, which the leveling experience of Warrior has always been, for the most part, enjoyable. And I'm getting the same feel in this expansion, so I'm kind of eating my words already, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Warrior is a lot of fun. But I'm just going to take a look at the Viper. We're just going to look at the Viper in real time, and we're going to see exactly how many positionals the class has. All right, so let's go ahead and swap the Viper. All right, so here's Viper. Now, let's see, where's our first one at? Deals. Okay, so there's our first one right there. Make sure I didn't miss it. My enemies. Yeah, so we have Hunter's Coil at gain of level 65. Delivers an attack with a potency of 500, 550 when executed from a target's flank. So this one you have to inflict it from the side. There's your first positional. Okay, cool. So that's from the side. Then you have this one. Same thing, 500, 550 when executed from a target's rear. That's Swiftskin's Coil. So you have two positionals at 65. One from the flank, one from the rear. So basically one to the side, one behind. All right, let's look at this one. That's just all enemies, all enemies, all enemies. But okay, that's just reawaken. 260, 260. Okay, here's the other one. And this one's untargeted. This one's an unassigned skill, and it's the same thing. Potency of 300, 360 when executed from a target's flank. So I'm assuming this one's gonna be, yep. Okay, this one's also from the flank. So you have two skills that can be executed from the flank. So okay, we've got 3 flank skills so far, and 1 rear skill. We have a rear, we have a rear. So we have 3 flank skills, 3 rears. Okay. Still not really seeing a problem. Let's keep going. Nearby, all nearby, all nearby, nearby. That's right. All nearby. See, potency. All nearby. Bye. So okay, that was from basically level 1 to 100. So from 1 to 100, we have essentially 3 flank skills, 3 rear skills. I really don't see why it's difficult to understand where you need to be with these skills or how to pay attention. Because you do your skill rotation, and all right. Then the best example be to find a dummy. Let me find a training dummy. Let's see. What's a good place to find a training dummy? Oh, I know where. So that work. Yep, this one has a training dummy. Admittedly, I forget where a lot of training dummies are because I don't utilize them very often. Actually, there's actually one. I know a better place to get a training dummy. That's actually closer. This one right out. This one right here in Ultimate Duel. Okay, so and mind you, I'm not saying that these positionals are easy to pull off the top of your head, that you're automatically going to know what's what. But there is a way you can make it easier on yourself. So we'll see what I do. I'm going to just basically use a striking dummy. I'm going to try to see what I need to do. So I'm going to look at the skills again and see if I can find a way to memorize it for myself, because I kind of use kind of a metric in my own head on how I remember what's what. So like you have Dreadwinder. Dreadwinder sets up, your advanced skills. So we're not going to worry about that right now. But when you do, it's basically going to make, I think this comes out. Oh wait, no. Yeah, this essentially comes out. So this one has to be done from the flank. This one has to be done from the rear. Which actually, I kind of already set it up in a perfect way. So if you look right over here, this one has to be done from the flank. I have it on my right side. So that kind of tells me where I need to be, just based on my own positioning for it. So I position it in a way to where it's like, okay, it has to be done from the side because it's on the side. This one's down, it's on a down button, so that basically tells me I need to go in the rear. So that's kind of how I could basically determine it for myself. Now, I don't exactly remember how I set up these skills or how they go into, so we'll basically use these skills and see what becomes what, and kind of determine from there what it is. And we'll see if we can't make this somewhat simple. So let's see what happens. So we're going to start with Dreadfang. So we do Dreadfang. Now while we're waiting, let's look at it. See, these don't have anything yet, so we'll just do Swift Skin Sting. Alright, so let's look at the next one. This is from the rear. So this one goes to the rear, so basically all we got to do is get behind them, increase our damage. Right? Now let's do Steel Fang. That one. And now we have this. This is from the flank. This is also from the flank. So, and that automatically increased our damage. Now let's see what happens if we do it from the front, if we don't do it from the front. So let's see what happens. Alright, so this one, it needs to be done from the rear. So we're in front of the enemy. It's 26k, that's with a crit. Let's try it again. And this one's what, from the flank, so we're doing the front. So it's 17. It was 19 when I went from the behind them. Try it again. Here. So this is from the rear. So we already know that these two are basically rear skills. So it seems like, depending on which one we start, depends on what we get. So we start with Dreadfang. It looks like we get the flank skills. So basically that's how you can, so that if anything, if you want to make it easier on yourself, just based on what I'm doing here, if you basically look at it this way, if you start with Dreadfang, you're going to end on the side. And if you start with Steel Fang, you end in the rear. So let's try that again. Here. And just making sure. That's from the flank. Okay, so now. Okay, so does it actually matter which way you start? It just depends on what it shows. Okay, so here's how I can memorize it for myself. If it ends with the red skills, if it ends with red skills, it's from the rear. But if it somehow ends with the green skills, it's going to be from the flank, since I use both those. So there you go. Don't really see why that's hard. Now, let's go with Dreadwinder. So we use Dreadwinder. That opens up that. So now we have Hunter's Quill and we have Swiftskin Quill. This one's flank, this one's rear. So you do either or. So if I want to start with the flank, just go to the side. And then of course you do this skill. These ones I don't think matter much. Nope, they don't. So now with this one, go behind them. Do the same thing. You throw this out. And these skills, do they matter? No. So just do one, next one, boom. See what I'm saying? So it's not difficult to learn positionals. And there's a lot of classes that have positionals. All you have to do is just take the time, read the description of your skills, and then find a way to memorize those positionals. With Viper, I think it's actually been simplified already because a lot of it boils down to pretty much color coding. Again, you start off here. If you want to do that, it's now red. Red is from the flank. So again, if it ends with the red skills, or no, rear, my bad, that was my fault. So if you end with the red skills, you end in the rear. And if you start off here and it ends with the green skills, then you're going to end in the flank. So simple enough. And then of course that just is whatever. But still, start off with it anywhere you want. Now you got that one, so you gotta go to the rear. Boom. Come here. And as you can see, my damage is ending pretty high. But if I go anywhere outside of those positionals, like for instance, that's supposed to be rear. If I come in the front, it drops considerably. So that ended up at 13k instead of the 20k that I got from going behind them, like I was supposed to. Same thing here. This is supposed to be at the flank. If I go here, if I hit them in the front, it's now 12.8k. Now let's try it again, but doing it where it's supposed to be. That's supposed to be behind. 16k. That's actually higher. Again, to the side. 24k. And of course, that was a crit, so that also makes a difference. So let's look again. 17. Here, in, to the side. 21. So positionals make a difference, but at the same time, it's not hard to learn positionals. And then of course, you know, with his reawakening, you have no positionals for reawakening, so you basically do that. You go in, just do one. You basically just do one after the next, and as you go, finish it off, and you're having your fun. Da-da-da. But again, positionals, not hard. And I don't even like positionals. But it took me, like, just for me doing this episode and showing you, it took me like less than 5 minutes. It took me maybe 5 minutes or less to learn what my positionals were, and then to find a way to memorize what those positionals were to make sure I'm in the right position every single time. So again, going through it, based on what I've memorized for myself, go to the right side. Just go where you need to go. Again, it's not a difficult thing to do. And you can even set yourself up early. If you already have an idea of where you're going to be, or if you already know the pattern of your rotation, like this one, he's probably going to end up behind him. So sure enough, so I'm already there. And the same thing I can do right here. It's already come to the side. I already know it's going to end with a flank skill, so now I'm already there. So you can basically, if you already know, once you start learning Viper, that's another thing too. Like once you play Viper enough, you'll start learning what skills are going to come up, And basically, it tends to, from what I've learned with the Viper, the skills tend to alternate. It basically, the finisher skills tend to alternate between green and red. So I already know the next one is probably going to be what? The last one was green, so the next one's going to be red. So I can just go ahead and get behind the enemy, and there it is. It's red. And now I'm already behind him, set up for the rear flank, or the rear skill. And now when I do my next one, it's going to be flank. So there I am. I'm already set up for it. Like, I'm already in position. Not a hard thing to learn. So why are they looking to have that changed when it's not even difficult to learn to begin with? And sure, there's basically 3 flank skills and there are 3 rear skills. But they're not even difficult. Like, at all. And actually, are there really 3? Go back and look. I identified this one being a flank, that one was being a rear. Okay, that's a little annoying. There, calm down. Alright. So, that's basically your first flank. That's your first rear. Again, easy enough to do. I have my setup on a skill bar to where I'll basically be in a position based on what I'm looking at. So if I want to do Hunter's Coil, I know I need to be on the side. Or I do that. I want to do Swift Skins Coil, then I know I need to get behind them. It's pretty much already set up on my bar. So basically my skill bar is basically the hint for me. So that's pretty much my hint to get that right. And then of course, like I said, keep going down. You got this one. Which, here's the other thing too. This is the other thing that kind of gets me. And there's nothing. They literally, if you even look at the name quite literally does the work for you. It pretty much does the legwork for you. Like it does. Flank, sting, strike. Flank. It automatically tells you where you need to be. So you already know flank, sting, flanks, bane. It's in the name. It tells you where to go if you just look at the name. So you already know you need to be on the side. If any of these 2 skills pop up, you got to be on the side because it says it in the name. Same thing here. Hind, sting, Hind's bane. Hind, behind. So it's in the name. Why do we need to change the position? Why do we need to change anything about these positionals when the name itself tells you where you need to be? They couldn't have made, honestly, with Viper, they couldn't have made it any easier to do positionals if they tried. And clearly they did. They've pretty much handed you the answer on a silver platter. So I don't get it. I really don't get it. But hey, I guess it's not for me to get. But let's go back to the article. All right, so now it says we've received feedback pertaining to the business of their skill rotation. To that end, we're planning several improvements, including the easing of directional requirements and changes to the effects of several actions. Again, I don't understand. The directional requirements are not the problem. In fact, more honestly, if we're being realistic, if you change the effects of the directional requirements, then that effectively ruins the name. That effectively ruins the essence of the skills, because then the names of the skills kind of don't make sense. If you do flank, sting, strike, but you don't need to flank the enemy to do it, that defeats the purpose of the name. Or hind, sting, strike, same thing. If you don't need to be behind the enemy to perform it, then what's the point of even using the skill? It just becomes another skill. And I really don't want that for Viper. I don't want Viper to just be another damage dealing class without any sort of without anything to try to make it somewhat unique. I mean, it's unique in its own right, but the directional requirements for those skills are self-explanatory with the name of said skill. The skills literally again tell you where you need to be. If you just pay attention to the name of the skill, you can't really go wrong. Now, if people want to complain that they don't like doing directionals and that they're just having to move too much, then my solution to you is to play another class. Just play a class that doesn't require you to do as many positionals. Problem solved. Or use True North, and that'll let you, be able to position yourself anywhere until it wears off. But there's no need to change the class as of right now. The class has been out for literally a week. There's no sense in changing the class right now. We don't even know how the class performs in raid content. I would say wait until at least our first raid. Like, either a normal raid or alliance raid, or hell, maybe even a savage. Wait at least until a savage raid launches, and then let's see how Viper performs in that content. Now, the Viper can't perform very well in a savage raid due to positionals not being very productive towards the fight, or let's say an enemy is positioned in a way that a Viper can't get behind them and they can only flank. Then maybe I would say let's revisit the conversation of changing directional requirements. But even in that sense, it's not the end of the world. If anything, if you can only flank the enemy, you can't get behind them. Only thing that really does is that just basically means that they have like two skills that can't fully utilize, or they have like three skills basically that can't fully utilize that directional input or that directional requirement. But they still have three other skills that can. So they lose some damage, but they don't lose all their extra damage. But let's keep going. We're aiming to implement these changes in patch 7.05, though we also intend to make some smaller adjustments to the range of certain abilities in patch 7.01. It will take a while longer, but we hope to address player concerns as best we can. Okay, how many of these how much of the player base is really complaining about Viper? Because I've been on YouTube, obviously, and I haven't heard anybody complaining about directionals on Viper. If anything, I've been hearing the exact opposite. I've been hearing people praising the Viper, saying that the class is very solid, the class is fast paced, that the class actually makes other classes feel slow by comparison. And I have to agree. Like, I'm actually having difficulty going back to some of my older melee classes because they just feel sluggish in comparison to Viper. Viper is just a very fast-paced job. Like the amount of buttons that you have to press, just the busyness of the job, it just makes it feel alive. It makes it feel very active, and it's an active job, and I love that about the class. In fact, I kind of hope that other classes kind of get brought in line with Viper in a sense, at least in terms of, making them feel a little more busy or at least a little more active. Because like I said, other classes just kind of feel sluggish in comparison. But one complaint I didn't have about Viper is directionals. Like, I've never had a complaint. Well, I'll take it back. I used to have a complaint about directionals. And you want to know the class that actually made me hate directionals, if I'm being perfectly honest? Monk. Monk was a class that was very directional. It's a very directional based class, and I think it still is that way. I haven't played Monk in this expansion, so I don't know if they made any changes toward that regard. But it was a very directional based class, and if you wanted to get the most out of Monk, you had to basically position. Like, positionals was a very big part of the class. It always has been. So if you wanted to basically maximize your damage, you had to learn your positionals. That's all there was to it. It's either that or just don't play the class. Viper, I feel like, is an evolved form of the Monk. In fact, if you look at how Viper plays with the buttons, how one button goes into another button off the same button, essentially, how they just basically change the buttons over, and how it can essentially, kind of begin this combo from almost any point. It really does play a lot like Monk in that regard. So Monk and Viper are very similar to each other, both in its positional requirements and in its button placement. I just feel like Viper is a better version of the Monk, but with dual blades. So I kind of have this mentality. If you don't like Monk, you're not going to like Viper. And if you don't like Viper, then chances are you probably never liked Monk. Now, if you do like Monk, but you somehow have a problem with Viper, then my question to you is why? Because they play relatively the same. If you look at it from a foundational standpoint, they play very similar. So again, if you don't like one, chances are you're not going to like the other. I like Monk now, and I love Viper. Well, I can't say I like Monk now because I haven't played him in this expansion, but I haven't really heard too many good things about him this expansion. But I love Viper. So again, I just don't see the need to change the class so soon after release, and I think that's going to have really bad implications going forward if that's the direction we're going in so soon into an expansion. I just think it's way too reactionary. For context, as a job, Viper has positionals. It does, which cause him to deal extra damage from either the rear or flank of an enemy on several of its abilities. Six. It has literally 6 positionals. And if we're being realistic here, even though it has 6 positionals, you will only ever use 2 of them at a time. And even then, that's only if you factor in its advanced skills. If you're just doing your standard 1-2-3 combo, essentially, you're only using 1 at a time. You'll either use a flank skill or you're going to use a rear skill, both of which are labeled in the title of the skill. So you really can't get it wrong because the name of the skill tells you what positional you're doing. And that's 4 of your skills right there. 4 of your skills tell you your positionals. It's literally in the name. Now, the last 2 skills, those a little different. They don't really tell you where you need to be based on the name of the skill itself. You have to actually read the description. But again, where I have the skills placed on my skill bar, that alone is the hint. I have one of my skills placed on the right on the right side, and I have one placed on the bottom. That automatically tells me that my right skill or the right side skill, I need to be on either the left or right side of the enemy to maximize my damage on that. So there you go. And on the bottom skill, that just tells me I need to be behind the enemy. So I've already basically set myself up for success based on how I label my skill or based on how I set up my skills. So in that regard, I don't even really need to read description. I just need to look at where those 2 skills are placed. But the other 4 skills, they are labeled in the title. So I could just read the name of the skill, and if I just happen to forget, like if I'm in the heat of the moment of the battle, if I'm in the heat of battle, and I somehow forget what skills supposed to be where, or where I'm supposed to be for whatever skill I'm about to do for that finisher skill. If I somehow forget or just blank or space out whatever or blank out, just have a brain fart. All I have to do is read the name of the skill, and it's going to tell me. If it starts with hind, I need to be behind the enemy. If it starts with flank, I need to be on the side of the enemy. Problem solved. Like common sense, people. It truly is common sense. We do not need to change the positionals or alter the way these positionals work when The developers have already done the legwork for us. They have already made it as simple as it can possibly be. And yet, somehow, a select few people in the community are complaining that it's not simple enough when all they have to do is read. Let that sink in, people. We have 4 out of 6 positionals. 4 of them that are labels for you. They tell you where you need to be. And yet there are still people in the community that can't get it right. And they want Yoshi P and the developers to change them because they can't read. I mean, come on, y'all. But let's continue. But let's start again. For context, as a job, Viper has positionals which cause him to deal extra damage from either the rear or flank of an enemy on several of his abilities. Like I said, 6 abilities out of numerous. They have several abilities, and only 6 of them are positionals. That's not a lot. This means a Viper needs to slide to the left or slide to the right after most of its combos. Oh no. A slight movement. Whatever will they do? But there's a wrinkle. Players are largely wondering just who the hell actually filed these complaints, as a lot of them, myself included, aren't having trouble at all. Exactly. It's a vocal minority. It's people who probably don't even play the game that much, who probably have even been playing the game for a long period of time. Therefore, they don't have much experience with classes that perform positionals. Because again, if you've been playing this game for any length of time, you know that Viper isn't the first positional class in the game. Like, not even close. Monk and Dragoon were like the first 2. And Monk was the most positional heavy class in the game for the longest. I think they kind of eased up on it after a few years, but it was the most positional intensive class. And a lot of players enjoyed that about the class. I personally didn't when I first started playing the game. I didn't like that it required so many positions and required me to have to be on this side, that side, this over here. I didn't like that, but I also didn't want to take the time to learn. And that's really what it boiled down to is I didn't want to take the time to learn what skills required me to be where. I just wanted to basically punch the enemy's face in and call it a day. I just wanted to be pow pow, big damage, yay. But that's not how Monk functions. If you really want to get the most out of Monk, you had to learn your positionals. It's the same thing with Dragoon. Dragoon is the exact same way, to a lesser extent, but still the same. If you want to maximize your damage with some of its skills, not a lot, but with some of its skills, if you want to maximize your damage, you need to learn your positionals. And I'll admit, I still haven't memorized my positionals with Dragoon, but I don't main Dragoon. I don't play Dragoon a lot. I just mess with Dragoon every once in a while. But I need to learn my positionals to maximize damage with some of its skills. Because that's how Dragoon plays. That's how Dragoon is meant to be played. You're meant to use positionals to maximize your damage because it has them. But nobody complains about Dragoon. Nobody complains about Monk. Now I'm trying to remember if Samurai has any positionals. I don't believe it does. Let me think of another class that might have them. Because I know Monk does, Dragoon still does. Yeah, no other classes are coming to mind as far as positionals are concerned. I'll have to check in game at a later date. Or hell, I could check right now. All right, so let's look and see if there's any other classes that have positional requirements. Like I said, we know Monk does. So let's look at that. Now Boot Shine doesn't have it. Let's see, True Strike, nope. Snap Punch. So Snap Punch requires you to be from the flank. So you got to be on the side to get the maximized flank. Okay, cool. Twin Snakes, no. I thought Twin Snakes did require it. Matter of fact, if memory serves it correctly, didn't Boot Shine used to require you to be behind the enemy? I think it did. Yeah, I think Boot Shine actually required you to be behind the enemy to maximize its damage. So if so, then they changed that. I'm not sure when. Let's see, True Strike doesn't matter. Let's see, Snap Punch is flank. That one doesn't matter. Let's see, Twin Snakes. Nope. Okay, Demolish requires you to be at the rear. Okay. Let's see, Dragon Kick. What's we got? So far there's only like 2 positionals, which I'm pretty sure Monk used to, yeah, Monk definitely used to have more positionals. Like it definitely used to have more positionals. Now it only has 2 from what I'm seeing. Keeping Oppo. Rising Raptor. I might have to use Monk for sure to see if the see what the changes are, that people aren't like, okay, there's another flank skill. Fire reply. Interesting. Straight. Oh, they really have changed a lot. Oh, Tornado Kick is now an unassigned skill. Huh. They really did. Okay, so, huh? Yeah, I'm definitely going to check out this class because this is different than what I remember. Anyway, let's see. So basically it seems like they gained 1 new flank skill, but no new rare ones. Yeah, Pouncing, Coral, that's flank. Yeah, so at 92 you gain a new 3 new skills, and 1 of them is a flank. So there's no more rear skills. So that basically Monk now only has 1 rear skill, which is Demolish. So that's all it has. It just has 1 rear skill. So basically there's what, 3 positionals for Monk, which is definitely less than what it used to have. So 3 positionals for Monk. Alright, let's see if Samurai has any. Again, I don't think it does. I don't remember Samurai having any. Oh, right. I don't remember Samurai having any positionals. Oh, there we go. Never mind. So there's a positional, Gecko. So there's 1 positional right there. I don't know how I forgot about that. And Kasha is flank. So, yep. Any others? That's 2 positionals so far. Let's see if we got another one. Nope, doesn't seem like it. So yeah, we basically have 2 positionals for Samurai. Highly doubt the dance is going to have any positionals, but we'll check anyway. I've been surprised before. Yeah, it's not going to have any. It's arranged. Alright, what other one do we have? Now, Ninja I know has positionals, because it's Ninja. But let's see how many it has. Exactly. Okay, Trick Attack from the rear. Alien Edge, rear, so that's 2. Armor Crush is for the flank. So that's 3 so far. So nothing there. So basically like 3 positionals. And then of course you got Dragoon. And this one, let's see, it should be, yeah, here we go. Chaos Thrust, that one's from the rear, so that's 1. Bang and Claw, flank. This one's also rear. So that's 3 so far. Let's see, there's gonna be another one. Chaotic Spring, rear. Rise of the Dragon is pretty cool. Oh. So yeah, 4 positionals, and it's had. What's going on, Twitch? I'm just doing another episode of. And this is episode 2 of Let's Talk About It. Been talking about the changes that are looking to be implemented into Final Fantasy XIV. Oh, shoot. Well, welcome home, my boy. But yeah, just talking about these changes that they're looking to implement, and some of them I just didn't understand. It's basically about Viper, one of the newest classes that they introduced into the game. People are complaining about the positionals. Problem is, the positionals are not the problem. And sure, it does have the most positionals. Oh, that's even better. Glad you had a great day, man. Mine's been pretty quiet. It's been hot as a mug out here, though. Like, humid. But, like I said, I was talking about the class, and people complaining about the positions, but then again, the article I was reading, and I basically decided to show in-game to look at the positionals, and I even showed an example of how this class plays. and how to memorize the positionals of this class, even though this class does have the most. I just looked at other melee classes, you know, throughout the game, and this one does have the most, which is funny because Monk used to be the most positional intensive class. They actually removed a lot of its positionals, so it's now down to like, I think 2, maybe 3 positionals, and it used to have more than that. Now Viper has like a total of 6 positionals. Now, upon hearing that, you're thinking, holy crap, that's a lot of positionals. And yes, it is, but here's the thing. You're only going to ever use one of those positionals if you're just doing a standard 3-button combo, which I can show you real quick since you're here, because it's very easy. And on top of that, the positionals on Viper are so simple, it's actually ridiculous. 4 of the positionals are labeled. So here's the first combo. We'll just start off with Dread Fangs. Do that one, then we'll do Swift Skin Sting, and now you got your next 3. Now the buttons that are highlighted, Heinz Sting Strike and Heinz Bane Fang. Both those skills start with Hein. That basically means you need to be behind the enemy. It's labeled for you. You can maximize your damage there, being behind them. Now let's do it again. We'll start with Steel Fang this time. Do that one, then we'll go into Hunter Sting. Now, you got Flank Sting Strike and Flanked Bang Fang. Now, Flank Bang Fang is highlighted. Flank obviously means you need to be at the side. Do that one. You maximize your damage. The skills are labeled, so you can't get it wrong. But yet still there's a vocal minority that have complained about this class, and the class has only been out for a week. So so basically I felt the need to do this video and make an episode talking about this, because it doesn't make sense that developers, because the developer is already talking about making changes to Viper. Exactly. You don't even play this game, but you saw what I was doing, and just based on what you could see how simple it is to use those skills and know where you need to be. Developers have gone out of their way to make this class pretty simple to play. And again, in matter of fact, this is basically this is pretty much my rotation if I were to use the class in any standard battle. So if I go into let's just pretend this is an enemy I want to go after. This would basically be how I would start my fights off. So I would go into here, use this skill to basically boost my attack speed. Then I would use this one, that was obviously rear, so I go behind the enemy. Then I would basically start off with this skill. This opens up these 2 skills. Now, Hunter's Coil and Swift Skin Coil, they don't tell you where you need to be, but if you read the description, Hunter's Coil requires you to be on the flank. Swift Skin Coil needs you to be behind the enemy. Now, where I have the position on my skill bar, that basically that hints at where I need to be. So I basically position my skill bar to where it kind of tells me. So I'm already on the side, so I'm gonna start with Hunter's Coil. And then the other skills don't require any positioning, so I can perform it from anywhere. Now I go into Swift Skin Coil, get behind them, do my damage. Now I can be anywhere I want to be. Front, side, doesn't matter. The next skill, a distance skill, no position required. From it, depth skill. Boom. Simple enough. And if I decide, and once I get enough resource acquired, which I can also use Serpent Ire to get that, I can then do Reawaken, which doesn't require any positional. Go in, basically Super Saiyan. Just go in and just have a blast. And there you go. Simple enough. And then of course I can end it with that. Add in some more damage. Boom. But it's not hard to learn. I feel like the people who complain about positionals in this game, because I used to be one of them. When I started, I've been playing this game, like I said, for about 8 years. I used to complain about positionals. And there's several classes in this game that have positionals, but they're not as bad as they used to be. Like Dragoon probably has the second most at maybe 3 or 4. I think it has 4 positionals total. But even Dragoon's not really that difficult. And then you have Samurai has maybe 2 positionals total. like maybe 3. Monk has like maybe 3 now, and he used to have more than that. But again, the classes have been simplified for a lot. At least a lot of the classes from the games prior or from expansions prior have been simplified. This is the newest class. It has the most positionals, true, but it's not hard to learn. I think the people that complain about positionals are the people who just aren't willing to learn, and they don't want to take the time to read. And if you're complaining about Viper and its positionals, even if you're complaining about the number of positionals, that to me is kind of moot and irrelevant, because 4 of the positionals, 4 out of the 6, are labeled for you. 2 of them start with hind, which means you need to be behind the enemy, and the other 2 are labeled starting with flank. That automatically tells you where you need to be. So there's no need to complain about those 4, because the positioning is in the title. Now again, the other 2, Hunter's Coil and Swift Skin Coil, you have a mild argument, but not even then, because if you just read the description, which we can go to Hunter's Coil, it says, delivers an attack with a potency of 500, 550 when executed from a target's flank. Again, I have my position on the right side of the bar, so that automatically tells me I need to do it from the side. So I basically simplified it for myself. So even if I don't know, even if I forget, I can just look at where it's positioned on my skill bar, and that hints at where I should be. And then Swift Skin Coil, same thing. Delivers an attack with a potency of 500, 550 when executed from a target's rear. Well, I have it positioned at the bottom of my skill bar, so that automatically hints that I need to be behind the enemy. So I've literally made it easier on myself. And the funny part about that is I did that without even thinking about it. I didn't even read the description. I was just putting skills on my skill bar in a place where I felt they would be better positioned for me to utilize them. And in doing so, I actually put those 2 skills in the best place I could put them to use them effectively and maximize my damage with this class. And, wait, am I 98? Oh damn, I thought I was 97. I'm actually 98. Oh never mind, I only need 2 more levels and I'll be done with this class. Cool. But anyway, again, it's not hard to learn these things, but you just have to be willing to put the time in. It's the same thing with like doing harder content in this game, which admittedly, I've never beat a Savage raid. I've never beaten an Ultimate raid. In fact, I've never even unlocked an Ultimate raid. But that's because I don't put the time in to learn the mechanics. If I actually put some time into it, I could complete a Savage raid and even an Ultimate. It's just that you got to put the time in. It's the same thing with learning classes. Any of these classes. And there's, I think almost 20 classes. There's like, 21 classes or so in this game. You can pick any one of these classes, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. If you take the time to learn the class, you can make it work, especially ones that have positionals. It may be a little bit more of a learning curve, positional classes, but it's not that much of a learning curve. And once you learn the class, you're good to go. Like one of my favorite tanks, well, not my favorite tank, but one of my better tanks is Warrior. I thought the class was kind of boring in the last expansion. I'm actually enjoying it in this expansion. It doesn't have positionals, it just basically has very, very good self-sustain. It's very good at keeping its health up. If it gets low on health, it can activate Bloodwetting. Boom. You can start absorbing health off of every hit you deal to the enemy. And it's not just one enemy. If you hit a group of enemies, you absorb health from every enemy you hit at the same time. So it's great for, this class is basically great for taking on groups of enemies at once and surviving. I love the class. Plus this skill just always tickles me. Just hit everything around me. And he had this one too. So, great class. But going back to the article, that even the person, like, it's funny too, because even the person that started this article, or that wrote this article, even he or she was questioning who was complaining about Viper. And more importantly, I have the question, like, who complained to such an extent that Yoshi P took notice and said, you know what, we should make changes. here we are back to the point of this article. It's like, but here's a wrinkle, but there's a wrinkle. Players are largely wondering just who the hell actually filed these complaints, as a lot of them, myself included, aren't having trouble at all. Seriously, guys, Viper is too busy, writes one player on the game's main subreddit, to the tune of 2,000 upvotes. After 10 years, we can't throw in directionals in a job. Y'all can't y'all can't just press true north, which that's a skill that's been available to pretty much every melee job for as long as I can remember, honestly. And basically what true north does is it makes it to where positionals don't matter. It pretty much nullifies any positional requirement on a skill. So this comes in very handy if you're in a fight against, like, say, a boss, and maybe that boss puts himself in a position to where you can't get behind them, or you can't necessarily get to their rear, but you still want to maximize your damage. You activate True North. Now positionals don't matter for about, 10, 15 seconds or however long the skill lasts. I forget. But for however long that skill lasts, you now don't have to worry about positional requirements. You can just deal your maximum damage no matter where you are against the target. I don't use True North nearly as much as I should, but I do understand its purpose and I know how to use it. And I also know that it exists. So I've never had a complaint about positional classes, even when I didn't like them, because True North was always there. But continuing, it may be hard in the beginning, but the euphoria you get when you finally understood something is one of the best feelings. I hope Viper continues to be a busy job because we need more complicated jobs. This right here, I completely agree with. One thing that I felt about the game from last expansion, like Endwalker was not a bad expansion. As far as the storyline was concerned, I actually loved the story for Endwalker. But my complaint about Endwalker was that it felt stale. It felt like it was kind of stagnant in terms of the content, and even just with the jobs. The jobs all feel rather the same. They feel relatively the same because they've homogenized so much of the job identity that much of the jobs started to feel like one another. With the exception of maybe one or two jobs here or there, or a couple of jobs here and there, they all feel relatively the same. And when you basically homogenize that much, it gets to the point where job identity becomes lost, and people start to get bored. And that's the thing is, I started to get bored with Endwalker because everybody, like, the classes really felt the same. It's like, unless you were running, and on top of that, if you weren't running like Savage content or Ultimate Raids or Extreme Trials, if you weren't doing any of that, you really had nothing to do. So the job identity was kind of important and it was kind of lost. Viper is, in my opinion, the first step to bringing back job identity. And now players are complaining about the Viper's job identity. So they're basically wanting Yoshi P to take away that job identity that was given to the job. And I'm like, no, we don't need to do that. We need Viper to stay the way it is. In fact, we need more jobs like Viper so that job identity comes back. We need a lot of the old jobs that we already have to restore some of their job identity, because we already have too much homogenization. Like, that's one of the reasons why it's hard for me to go back to another melee job. Like, I play Viper and I enjoy Viper so much that when I try to go back to some of the other melee jobs, it doesn't feel the same. They feel sluggish. They feel kind of bland in comparison, because Viper just is like a breath of fresh air. It just gives me that feeling of excitement whenever I'm going in and I'm doing those skills, and I'm just basically going in and I'm just doing one skill after the next skill after the next skill, and then you just kind of switch up, and then you do an awakening, you start doing those skills, and then you just have this epic finish. And the funny thing is, I have even shown you all the skills that Viper can do, because again, I'm only 98. I still have his level 100 skills that enhance him even further. So there's still more than Viper can do. But just seeing what he could do at 98 gives you an idea of what this job is capable of. And there's a small section of the player base that want to change that. And I don't understand why, other than the fact that They just probably don't want to learn how to use the job correctly. They would rather change the job to suit their needs or suit their play style instead of using the job as it was intended to be played. And the fact that Yoshi P is actually considering making changes to the job so early into the expansion, just it just sets a really bad precedence going forward. Because if we have a vocal minority that can force changes, to job classes so soon into an expansion's life cycle, it kind of just concerns me as to what we have to look forward to with the rest of the expansion. Like what's going to happen when people start complaining about Pito, which, to be fair, Pito is like OP as hell right now. So they might actually nerf Pito a bit, but I hope they don't nerf it into the ground. If anything, they should buff the Black Mage rather than nerf Pito. But let's continue. I think that's about the end of the article, possibly. But it seems way too early to make any changes to Viper, writes another player on the discussions subreddit in response to the news post. It seems like people aren't taking the time to go hit a dummy for a bit and get comfortable with the job first, but instead go to the forum to complain. And on top of that, let's bring this one to the forefront. Why are we taking complaint threads in Reddit seriously? I mean, come on now. Again, it's been a week since this expansion launched, and we've already got people on Reddit bitching and complaining about a job that there's no way in hell they've taken time to learn. Now, granted, I've been playing the game since early access last Friday. Not this past Friday, but the Friday before. So I've taken my time to actually learn the job, learn how it plays, this and the third. I've had basically a whole ass week. And I have no complaints with how the job plays. You yourself have seen how the job plays based on what I've shown you. You don't even play the game, and even you could understand how the job plays. So if you who don't even play the game could understand the job, there's no excuse for the people who do play this game not to understand the job. And yet we have people that just don't want to take the time. And again, we have training dummies located throughout the game. You can go find any training dummy anywhere in the game. You can hit the training dummy for as long as you want to get used to the job, to figure out your rotation, to figure out how the job plays. That's what the training dummies are for. They're there for a reason, for you to actually practice. In fact, I should have did that before I went to a dungeon. I actually did the opposite. I actually went into a dungeon and I learned how to position I basically started, reworking my skill bar while in a dungeon, but I was also doing a dungeon solo and I was doing it with NPC parties. So I was able to kind of take my time and, rework the skills as needed till I got them where I wanted them. But let's continue even further. Let's see. You turn to the official English forums and there's yet more confusion. It's easy enough to understand once you get the hang of it while leaving plenty of room to grow. I agree. Changing the class this early on in its lifespan feels like overreacting. Yes. This 150%. It is overreacting. Because if they change the class now and they overcorrect to the point that it makes the class undesirable, well, now they're going to have another problem months down the line that they're going to have to work on fixing. Because then they're going to have to either A, revert the changes, or have to tweak it even further to try to please both sides. And what I think they should do right now is, I don't think they should change the class at all. I think they should leave the class alone, wait a few months, wait at least until we get our first Savage raid. At the very least, wait until we have a Savage raid, because I think because honestly, that's usually where you can really gauge a class's effectiveness, is in harder raid content. when you have like savage raids and ultimate raids, more so savage than ultimate, because I don't think you really want to wait until an ultimate raid launches to say this class sucks. I think a savage raid is good because you get multiple savage raids before you get usually your first ultimate. So I'd say once the first savage raid launches, see how all the classes perform. But since we're talking about Viper specifically, see how Viper performs in its first savage raid content. And if it performs well, we're good. But if it underperforms or the positionals prove to be more of a problem based on the raid setup, then we can revisit the conversation of changing the positionals or changing how positionals work or just possibly removing some of those positionals. But we don't need to have that conversation right now because we don't even have a savage raid to gauge the effectiveness of those positionals off of. So there's no point in changing those positionals and how they work now when there's no hard content to gauge that off of. And that's the best, in my opinion, that's the best way to gauge the effectiveness of a class is how it performs in harder content. All the classes are going to perform well enough in casual content. That's why they made the casual content the way it is so that every class can perform well enough in it from a basic standpoint. It's when you get to the harder content that you really get to see how effective or ineffective that class is. And that's what the harder content is for, I feel. It's just to kind of gauge your class. One, it gauges your skill level with the class, but two, it also gauges the class itself. Because if the class isn't up to par, it's going to show in that content without question. It's going to show. It's going to show based on the player numbers of how many players use the class. It's going to show based on its damage numbers for your damage classes. Your healing class is going to show how well they can heal. Your tank classes, how well they can tank. All that's going to be shown based on the content. But right now, we don't have a lot of content. The game just started. Saying the expansion just launched. So there isn't much content to go off of to gauge the effectiveness of Viper outside of the fact that Viper does just fine in dungeons. I've yet to have a problem with Viper in a dungeon. In fact, every time I see a Viper in a dungeon, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. You know what I'm saying? Or if I'm playing Viper in a dungeon and there's another Viper with me, we good. We're going to blaze on through. You know what I'm saying? But again, you can't make that kind of determination as far as like how the positionals work and whether or not we should get rid of them based off of story content. Story content is not meant to be hard. It's just not. But back to us. But let's continue. But yeah, changing the class this early on its lifespan feels like overreacting, writes one player. Another thread author suggests that perhaps they shouldn't listen to players' hot takes about how hard Viper is when it hasn't been out 1 week. So much of this. That honestly, that's about the same as people complaining about Shadow of the Erdtree being hard, and that game hadn't even been, that DLC had been out like what, a couple weeks, and people were bitching and complaining about how hard that DLC is, completely glossing over the fact that Elden Ring in general is a hard game because it's a Souls game. And I'm still playing Elden Ring. Matter of fact, I have access to the DLC because I beat Mog, was it, about a week ago. I finally beat Mog. And what's even funnier about that is I made that fight so much harder than it needed to be. I'm just going to deviate for a second. But I made that fight so much harder than it needed to be because I was wearing an item called, I think it's called Star Scourge Sword Seal, or Radon Sword Seal, basically. What it does is it basically gives you a free 20 levels. It adds like 5 levels or 5 points to 4 different stats. So I think it's like strength. I think it's like strength, vitality, dexterity, and I believe it was vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity. I think there's a 4 stats that it adds 5 points to each. So it's basically a free 20 levels. Great item, but there's a catch. it increases your damage you take by 15%. Now, I didn't think 15% was a big deal. And in your lower levels, it kind of isn't. But as you get higher level, it starts to show its ugly head, or it starts to rear its ugly head, because that 15% scales with enemy damage. So the harder your enemies start to hit, the more severe that 15% starts to feel. That's why whenever I was facing Mogwin and I was trying to beat the Bloodlord, the guy was like two-shotting me, or in some cases even one-shotting me, because that 15% damage debuff, or that 50% defense debuff, was increasing his damage exponentially. So when he should have been dealing like maybe a quarter of when he should have been dealing like maybe a quarter damage to my health, or maybe even a third, he was doing like 3/4 damage to my health in one shot, when he should have been dealing like maybe a quarter. Or he was dealing like 95% in one hit, when he should have been dealing like maybe 50%. But that's because I was wearing that item. And it wasn't until after I finally beat him that I realized I needed to take that item off. When I started reading, I started reading some articles, or started reading some sites, articles and whatnot online. So by the time I realized that I need to take that item off, I had finally beaten him. So I basically beat him. I had basically beat him while essentially handicapping myself. So I basically handicapped myself in that fight and still managed to beat him. But it took me like 30 tries, when it should have taken like me maybe 15. So it was basically my own fault for making that fight so virtually impossible. Now with Millennia, by the time I got to Millennia, I had already learned my lesson. I had taken that item off. I basically forgot about the item. I still have it, but I don't even think about using it. And with her, it took me less than 10 tries to beat her. And yes, I use a Mimics tier. I don't care. It's in the game, therefore I used it. But I used my bleed build. I had good armor. I had a plus 10 Mimics tier. All my weapons were maxed out. And I finally beat her. One of the hardest bosses in the game, and I managed to beat her. Less than 10 tries. I'm happy. But I say all that to say that people complain about things when they haven't really taken time to understand it. In the same way people complain about Shadow of the Erdtree being too difficult, despite knowing that it's a hard game to begin with, players in this community are doing the same thing with the Viper, complaining that Viper is a problem when they haven't even taken the time to truly learn the class. And when the class has only been out for a week, can you really say that you know how the class plays? Like, I have a basic understanding of Viper. I have a pretty good understanding of Viper, but I've also been playing this game for, 8 years. And Viper is not the only positional class that I've come across. It's like the 4th or 5th. It just happens to be the class that currently has the most positionals out of all the classes. But second to him is Dragoon, who has 4. No one complains about Dragoon's positionals. And again, Dragoon has 4 of them. Viper literally has 2 more at 6. But 4 out of its 6 positionals are labeled. So it's not like you can't figure it out. You just gotta read. It's just so funny to me. But back to the article. Some complaints suggest this overreaction is due to Square Enix prioritizing the feedback of players on the Japanese forums over its English-speaking counterparts. This assumption has one foot in truth and the other in speculation and conjecture. Okay. It's true that as a developer, Square's had a nasty habit of ignoring non-JP specific issues like the impact of the game's shoddy netcode leading to clipping, which, oversimplified, essentially means that any ping above 50 can reduce your DPS by locking you into certain animations. Oh. I'm glad I never experienced that issue. at least not that I can recall. On the other hand, from what I can tell via machine translation, while there have been some Japanese players discussing the demanding positional requirements of the job before the news announcement, others are as equally confused as their English-speaking counterparts. Personally speaking, I actually think Viper feels too straightforward right now, and any subsequent dumbing down would probably see me huck my blades into the abyss. I've been leveling it alongside Ninja while doing the main scenario quest, and its core rotation mainly boils down MMO whack-a-mole. You know what? I can't really disagree. Like, it is a very straightforward job, and even when I was showing it off, in the just a little bit ago on how I go about my rotation, it is very straightforward. Like, again, like I said, the developers I feel went out of their way to make this job as easy to understand as possible, given how many buttons the class has. And the class does have a lot of buttons. It has a lot of skills that it can utilize at any given time. But like I said, they've gone out of their way to make the class very easy to pick up and play and understand, especially when it comes to its positionals. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but once again, 4 out of its 6 positionals are labeled. Like, the position you need to take with your character is in the title of the skill. 2 of them start with hind, meaning you need to be behind the target. The other 2 start with flank, meaning you need to be to the side of the target. So it doesn't get any simpler than that. If you need a job any more simplified than that, you should probably just stop playing the job and just play something completely different. Just play a different class. Maybe play Samurai. Samurai has like maybe 2 positionals total. That being said, players could be reading a bit too much into the announcement. Planning to look into positionals doesn't mean the job will be stripped of all of them. I wonder if easing here means simply improving, say, the color contrast on the hotbar icons, or giving some indication on the job's UI elements which positionals coming up next. And once again, I have to direct your attention to the names of the skills. There doesn't need to be a color contrast on the hotbar icons. There doesn't need to be any other indication of the elements which indicate what position is coming up next. It's in the name. There's only 2 skills on there that you may need some indication as to what skill should be positioned where. And even with that, I showed you if you're a controller user, I've already showed you on my controller setup how I would position those 2 skills specifically so that you would not screw that up. So that you would be good to go. I've already shown you how I would set that up to make that easy for you. And I'll show you yet again. I'm at the Viper. The 2 skills in question: Hunter's Coil, Swift Skin Coil. These are the only 2 skills that, just by looking at them, you would not know where to position your character, just by looking at the name of the skill. But if you read just the first 2 sentences, in fact, you ain't got to read the first 2 sentences, just read the second sentence. 550 when executed from a target's flank. That's Hunter's Coil. I have it positioned on the right side of my skill bar. Well, technically the left side, but on the right most part of the left part of the skill bar. So I have it positioned on my right button, which for me is button B. So since it's positioned on the right, or basically on the side, that's a hint to me that this is a flank skill. Now with Swift Skin Coil, I have positioned on the bottom button. that's a hint that this is a rear skill. These are the only two skills, again, that aren't labeled in the name to tell you where you need to be. But if you do like I did and just put them in a certain place on your skill bar, that will be your first hint as to where you need to be for it. So this one, flank skill. This one, rear skill. Now with the others, and again, I have to actually go into the bar, or go into my action and traits. Let's see. Now with these two skills, flank sting, flanks bane. The first part of the name, flank. These two right here are flank skills, obviously, because it's in the name. The next two, hind sting, hind's bane. It's in the name. It means you need to be behind the target. What more indication do you need when the name itself tells you what you need to know? What more do you need from the developers when they've already gone out of their way to simplify the process for you? Just by the names of these skills, that already tells me that developers develop these skills with that complication in mind. They already knew that players might get overwhelmed or players might overthink what they need to do. So they simplify the process for you just by naming the skills what you needed to be. They named the skills the positionals. They already thought this out for you. They've already done the legwork. So it's like, again, there's nothing more that needs to be done. There's nothing further that needs to be indicated. If you need more indication than that, like I said, you just need to play a different class. Now back to the article. Now, part of why I'm enjoying myself is because on my UI, I keep important debuff timers in a transparent hotbar to the left of my character for Viper. I've actually gone ahead and put its branching combo attacks, which light up to point you in the right direction, there, which is a first for any job in my retinue. Okay. Usually that spot's reserved exclusively for important buffs or abilities I use once every minute. Okay. Another part of the problem, I think, is that the Viper job quest does, and I mean this with all the kindness in the world, a hilariously bad job of actually teaching you anything. I can't disagree with that, but then again, I've never looked at any quest for, any teachable moments. But I do have to agree with that, because like I think a friend of mine even told me that the job quest is supposed to teach you how to use a job. And I did use it, but by the time I actually started going into the job quest for Viper, I had already kind of familiarized myself with the job anyway, 'cause I just kind of dived in. That's usually how I learn a lot of my jobs. I just basically pick a job and dive straight on in and learn as I go. I'm very hands-on, so I learn as I go and figure it out, through trial and error. So I kind of already knew what to do. So when it was basically trying to teach me, quote unquote, I was already basically familiar with what I needed to do, so I just basically did it. But anyway, you are completely overwhelmed with completely meaningless technobabble about its branching cobbles, and the tooltips feel like the ingredients list on the back of a bottle of pills. Oh, that's actually kind of funny. You're probably better off just hitting a target dummy and drawing your own conclusions. Again, you don't need to, though. Like, hell, even with this screenshot right here, this screenshot even proves my point. Hind's Bane Fang, 360 when executed from a target's rear. Hind, rear. Again, it's in the title. So it's like, just saying that you should just, hit a target dummy and draw your conclusions and just figure it out. You don't need to when the developers have already gone out of their way to tell you what you need to know. If you can't figure it out just based on reading the skill description, reading the skill name and its description, I really don't know what else to tell you. But especially since Viper ultimately boils down to press the buttons the UI tells you to and occasionally shuffle to hit the flank or the rear. It's incredibly simple. Yes, I agree. The class is very simple, but it's not exactly a bad thing. Like, it's simple, but satisfying. Either way, I hope Yoshi P and the company, in the company, see the immediate question marks flying above players' heads and changes course. I agree that it's way too early to commit to any changes based on feedback. It takes more than 5 days to get comfortable with a new job. Very much agree. Very much agree. And as many players have pointed out, it's not a bad thing even if Viper has a little complexity. I would argue, like he said, that it probably needs, well, I don't think it needs more complexity. I would argue that more classes need complexity alongside it. Hell, a lot of classes that used to have complexity have been simplified to the point of redundancy. I think Astro comes to mind with his card system. Many Astro mains have complained about his card system for years at this point, and they want that back. Monk, I think, has been simplified a little too much because, like I said, it used to have more positionals. Now it has less. So I don't really agree with that. I think they need to give some of his positionals back. Let's see. What else? What other class got simplified quite a bit? It'll come to me. Still, I've yet to try Pictomancer out yet. That class is pretty OP. I ain't gonna lie. And I see some happy accidents in my future. So if Square Enix massacres my boy, I'll probably just give up and become Bob Ross or something. You know what? That's actually not a bad idea. I could actually, if I decided to be Pito, I could just change my hairstyle and freaking just wear an afro on my character, and then just have a paintbrush, and of course, just wear like a little button up shirt and some slacks, and that could just basically make my own Bob Ross. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much the article. But yeah, that's pretty much the story right now with that. And again, I think people are overreacting so quickly, and I don't understand why. Let's see. Let's see what the comments are saying. This ought to be interesting. Let's see. The FF14 team has been stellar at making classes feel stupid enough to play. Oh, this comment's off to a great start. Like, no chill. I like it. Just automatically spicy. Just. Dark Knight used to be interesting and fun. Then they made it feel as dumb and face rolly as it is now when they homogenize roles. Interesting and fun. Which expansion are we referring to when we say that? Because if we're talking about Heaven's Ward, I found Dark Knight to be annoying. Like the amount of MP management that class required in Heaven's Ward was ridiculous, to say the least. And it didn't really give me that high risk, high reward feeling. Like, I guess it kind of did, because if you could manage Dark Knight during that time, you were pretty good. And Dark Knight played a whole lot differently in Heaven's Ward than it does now. Because like I remember, I was thinking about this earlier too, in regards to Dark Knight. But I remember when Dark Knight came out, back when MP was actually, back when both MP and SP were a thing. Because those of you who have been on this game long enough to remember, we used to have SP alongside MP. You know, your melee classes used SP and your casters used MP, and then certain melee classes, whether they were tanks or otherwise, we use both MP and SP. Dark Knight was one of those classes. It used SP for certain skills, and then it used MP for others. One such skill, I believe, was Dark Arts. Because that was also during a time where tanks received a 25% damage debuff whenever they went into tank stance. Heaven's Ward was also where I believe the warrior basically started to become man mode warrior. I believe that Heaven's Word was the birth of man mode warrior, because the warrior, I believe to this day, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe to this day that was the only class that was given both a tank stance and a DPS stance. No other tank class was given that. Dark Knight came the closest to that, because they were able to use their tank stance, which gave them, of course, a 25% damage debuff. But then they also had an ability called, I think it was Dark Arts, which gave them a 20% damage buff that they can use alongside their tank stance. So basically it retroactively mitigated 20% of that 25% debuff. So they will only suffer a 5% debuff versus a full 25%, which on paper sounded great. In execution, at least in my experience, it didn't really do much. Like, the damage always felt kind of meh with Dark Knights. And then, of course, whenever you use the Dark Arts ability, it would continuously drain your MP gauge. So basically, you had to stay in combat to keep that MP up in order to keep that buff active. Because if you ran out of MP, you would lose your buff. Or if you got too happy with using certain skills, like you couldn't go MP crazy with a lot of skills. So basically, MP management was far more important back then than it is now. So I will agree that they definitely have homogenized the class a lot, because back then you had to be very careful about what skills you used and when, because you had to constantly be mindful of your MP. And just so we're clear, this is also back when we didn't have a 10k MP cap. Back then, you could have your MP raised alongside your HP. So, you might have 20, 30k MP back then. And you still had to be mindful of how much MP you were consuming with Dark Knight versus how much you could restore. And now we just have 10k MP across the board for every class. But let me continue. But let's continue what he was saying. Let's see. But yeah, Dark Knight used to be interesting and fun. Then they made it as dumb and face rolly as it is now when they homogenize roles. From what I've heard, because I haven't played it yet, Gunbreaker is what Dark Knight used to be in terms of complexity. Not really. I don't think Gunbreaker was ever on the same. I don't think Gunbreaker is what Dark Knight used to be in terms of complexity, because Gunbreaker doesn't have MP management. Dark Knight does. In fact, the only other tank that has any form of MP management is Paladin, and Paladin has it to a much simpler degree. I mean, much simpler. It is very easy to manage your MP with Paladin. In fact, if you run out of MP playing Paladin, you're probably using clemency too much, because that's the only reason you should ever run out of MP with Paladin outside of dying and being rezzed. Because any MP skills that you do use with the Paladin, you're going to quickly restore that MP just going through your rotation. Like, I've never had a moment where I've ever had to truly concern myself with my MP or even look at my MP. I've never really had that issue playing Paladin. Again, unless I'm just spamming clemency, which almost never happens because you have too many other healing options to even remember clemency. Half the time I have to remind myself that I even have clemency. Like, realistically, I have to actually remind myself that clemency is still a thing, because it's kind of useless now. Like, it's good in like I think it's okay in an oh shit moment. Like, if your healer is just completely freaking completely fucking off and not paying attention, you throw out clemency, it can come in, it can, really save your ass a little bit. But then again, so can Hollow Ground, provided it activates when it's supposed to. But yeah, Gunbreaker, I don't think Gunbreaker is comparable to Dark Knight, even in the past sense. But see, this guy says it used to be, but it was also a nightmare to properly play back in its release day. Yes, that's what I was referring to when I said the MP management was annoying back then. Again, like I was saying, there was a lot to manage when it came to MP. MP management was a huge focus on the Dark Knight class back when it debuted in Heaven's Ward. Because, like I said, you had Dark Knight, which gave you the 20% damage buff, which you wanted to have active at all times if you really wanted to take advantage of the class. But it also drained your MP consistently. So there were times where you would actually have to disable it. So, for instance, if you weren't actively in combat, or there's going to be some downtime, you would want to turn it off. So even though you would want to keep it active at all times, there was times where if you knew like you had to make a huge run, like if you had to run across the field or to get to a place, and it's going to be a while before you got into your next battle or your next enemy encounter, we would turn Dark Arts off to save the MP so that we can restore some of our MP back. Because otherwise, you're just burning MP. Now, granted, when you're not in battle, you're going to restore most of your MP anyway, but a lot of times it wasn't worth it to have your MP constantly draining when you could just turn it off and then turn it back on when you need it. But then, like I said, add to that, when it's active, you're constantly draining MP. You got to basically do your attack skills, but then you also have to do skills that can restore MP. So you're having to weave back and forth. You have to go back and forth between skills that can just focus on damage and skills that can restore your MP so that you can keep that buff active, on top of having other skills that cost MP that are damage skills. So there was a lot of management. Like this class back in its release day required a lot of MP management. And if you wanted to play optimally, you had to fully understand that mechanic. You had to. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself running out of MP more often than not. Which in case if that happens, you lock yourself out of a lot of skills that the Dark Knight uses. Because at least, I think back then, about half of the skills that Dark Knight used required MP. So, and some of those skills actually a lot of those skills were its more damaging skills. So you would lose a lot of your high damage skills if you ran out of MP. So basically you never wanted to run out of MP. But you will also have to spend a lot of time restoring your MP, so which means you actually have to stop damaging a lot of times, which means that made management so much more important, so that you wouldn't have to go back and forth, or just have to stop altogether and just say, okay, I gotta restore MP. It was a lot. And the people who took time to learn the class and actually play it well, I commend you, especially back then. I commend you if you were a Dark Knight main back then because I couldn't do it. I I tried, but I couldn't do it. But back to what you're saying. Don't forget that encounter design and difficulty change significantly as well. That participate at making class feel simpler. Modern Dark Knight is not as simple as it seems. It can unleash the highest DPS of all tanks, but it is very hard to optimize skill. The addition of TBN and other mechanics really rounded it out. I agree. TBN was good a couple years ago. Now TBN almost feels meaningless. It needs a rework. And I spoke about this yesterday in yesterday's episode. I spoke about my issues with TBN and how much I pretty much at this point I kind of despise the skill now. Like the skill just really frustrates me because we're 3 expansions past its debut, and it hasn't received a single rework in 3 expansions, and it needs one. Zeno has talked about this in length, and again, I agree with him. It needs a rework. They need to do something about it. In dungeons, it doesn't really work well because you are heavily dependent on the shield being broken that it provides. And this is also, you can get a free use of a skill that costs the same amount of MP when you can just spend that MP and get that skill's effect and the damage. So why would I wait? So if I'm going to waste waste 3k MP, either way, I would much rather waste it using a skill that's going to give me a damage boost rather than use it on a skill that's going to mitigate damage. But I have to also rely on the fact I have to also pray that the shield gets broken so that I can get a free use of the other 3k skill that will give me the damage and damage boost. Again, I'd rather just use the 3k to get the damage and the damage boost and just spare myself the trouble of hoping the barrier gets broken. Because if it doesn't, well, now I've just wasted 3k and I got to waste another 3k in order to do the other skill anyway. So now I've essentially lost 6k instead of 3k. All for 1 damage boost. But I'm not gonna rant on Dark Knight again because I could rant for a minute on Dark Knight. And it's mainly because I like the class and I want to like the class more. I feel like the class should be more, and that's one of the reasons why I rant so much on the class whenever I talk about it. Why I get so frustrated even thinking about the class, because I feel like the class should not be in the position that it's in while the other classes continue to excel in a sense. Like, especially when I look at Paladin. Paladin was one of the most boring classes in the game when I first started playing this game. 8 years later, Paladin's actually one of my favorite tanks. And I used to want absolutely nothing to do with the class. And now it is, like I said, one of my favorite tanks. I love Paladin now. In fact, there's oftentimes where I favor Paladin over Warrior, even though Warrior sells far better than Paladin, especially in terms of dungeon content. Warrior just completely sells, and it even sells over Paladin in terms of raid content. Paladin holds its own, but in terms of like damage, yeah, Warrior's going to beat Paladin every time. But Paladin has definitely come a long way over the years compared to what it was in 2.0. But then you look at Dark Knight, which has been around since 3.0, and then you look at the Dark Knight now, and I can't really say the same about Dark Knight. I don't feel like Dark Knight has really excelled. If anything, I feel like Dark Knight has been held back more often than it hasn't. And I don't understand why. It's like the developers don't like the class. It's like they either don't like the class or they just don't know what they want to do with the class. But let's see what else they're saying. Why make a game overly complicated? Okay, I'm gonna need some context on that one. Okay, make the game overly complicated. How are we? I mean, is he talking about the class, or is he talking about the game itself? I've heard nothing but complaints about the oversimplification of classes in 14 for years now. Perhaps this overreactive response is one culprit. Yeah, like people have been complaining about the oversimplification of the classes. I even complain. I even have my complaints about the oversimplification. Like they've done too much. Like again, classes don't really feel they don't feel like they have much of an identity anymore, and that's the biggest problem with a lot of that's a problem with a lot of these classes is there's really no job identity anymore, and the little bit of job identity they do have, like Viper is probably the first class to have like a real identity, I think, in quite some time, and they're already looking. Like, at least the vocal minority that are complaining about Viper is like they're already looking to remove that identity. And I completely disagree with that. We shouldn't remove anything from Viper, at least not right now. And I don't even think we should remove anything from Viper later. Personally, I think Viper is fine the way it is. But at the same time, I would also like to see how Viper performs in Savage content. I've said this before earlier in the episode. Wait until at least the first Savage raid launches, see how Viper performs in Savage, and then we can revisit the conversation as to whether or not we need to change something about Viper, whether or not we need to adjust the positionals or even remove a positional or two, which I don't think we should remove any of them personally. That's just my opinion. But let's wait until we see how it performs in higher end content. But the content we currently have available is not enough to properly gauge this class. It's just not. Even if you factor in EX trials, I don't even think that's really enough. And I think we have what I think there's one EX trial currently available, which I need to hurry up and get to in game so I can actually try it. And you know what? I'm gonna level max um Viper. I'm gonna get Viper to 100, and I'm also gonna get my Warrior to 100. So I'm gonna have both those classes at 100, and I'm gonna try the Savage with Viper, and I'm also gonna try it with Warrior. But I'm mainly gonna try it with Viper just to see how it performs. And if nothing else, I'll even stream it. If I can get because I'm going to be playing I'm going to be gaming tomorrow because like I said my episodes are basically going to be Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so that's 4 episodes a week of Let's Talk About It. So this is, like I said, this is episode 2. Episode 1 was yesterday, so tomorrow's going to be game day. So it's I'll probably be labeling that it's game time, and that's just why I'll label that it's game time, and whatever game I choose to play, that's what I'll play. But as far as like the episodes are concerned, uh, it'll be labeled, Let's Talk About It episode, 2, 3, so forth, and I'll give a title to the episode. Like I said, yesterday was introduction mainly, and I talked about a few videos. This one is basically about this subject here. So I'll be definitely looking into what episode or what subject to talk about on Tuesday. But like I said, if I can get to the end game between now and tomorrow night, then I will most certainly post that or stream that because, like I said, I want to see how Viper performs at least in the stream content. To try to gauge that, because like I said, what people are saying and complaining about Viper, the vocal minority, I think it's ridiculous, and I want to see in real time how the class performs in harder content. And again, I don't think stream trials are good. I don't think stream trials are enough, but I think it's a start. Now, once they release Savage, that's when we can really start testing things out. That's when I feel we can really start to gauge, how our classes are performing, what they may need to improve, what may need to be scaled back, so forth and so forth. But as far as right now, we can't properly gauge the class. We just can't. It hasn't been out long enough. We haven't had enough time. That's all there is to it. It just hasn't been enough time to properly gauge the class. But let's see another response. Let's see. Alternative viewpoint. Making this change as soon as possible will be better for ripping the band-aid off the Viper changes, so this entire discussion becomes a distant memory. Yeah, you sound like one of the people that actually is for the change. So that kind of tells me that you probably don't like the positionals either, and you're just hoping that they'll just go ahead and do it and get it over with. I feel like this problem wouldn't exist if they let you start new jobs at level 1. Part of the reason I quit playing was because I hated how high level the new jobs start out as. It gives you no time to get used to it and grow with it. Remove everything from your hotbar, then add only the abilities up to level 15. Run Satasha once or twice, add a few more abilities, run the next dungeon, etc. I mean, that is a good point. Or here's a thought. Just run dungeons, and what you can say. I mean, I get what they're saying. I do get that to understand. You start your classes at a higher level, but here's why they do that. When you start a new expansion and they release a new job for said expansion, you want to be able to use that new job in the new content as soon as possible. Let's like with this expansion, right? Dawn Trail. I want to get into the new content as soon as possible. Viper and Pito start off at level 80. That means I only need 10 levels before I can start doing the Dawn Trail content. Now, if they started me all the way back at level 1, that means I would have to gain 89 levels before I would be able to use that class, that brand new class, in the new content. That's why they start you off 20 levels away from max level. Basically, they start you 10 levels away from last expansion's level cap. So again, like with Endwalker, you start off at level 70. The level cap was 90. They start off the new classes at level 70, which means you only had to gain 10 levels before you can start doing Endwalker content. It's funny that he complains about this, but most of the people did not complain about that. In fact, nobody really complained about Reaper or Sage. But now people are complaining about Viper because of positionals. And again, the whole high starting level, that's been around since Heavensward. Like, that's literally been a thing since 3.0. And back then they started you off at level 30. And actually, yeah, because it technically used to be worse. Because the level cap for Heavensward was 60. And then they started you off at level 30. So you had to gain 20 levels before you can do Heavensward content with those new classes. And Stormblood, I think Stormblood was when they actually started doing the 20 levels below. So in Stormblood, they would start you off at 50, so you only needed to gain 10 levels to be able to do the Stormblood content. So that's been a thing, like I said, for a minute, where you'd be 20 levels away from the max with your new classes, and they've continued that trend, like I said, since Stormblood. They first started in Heavensward, but then, like I said, you were 30 levels away from max, and you had to gain 20 levels in order to be able to do the new content. And then they bumped it up. So, like I said, from Stormblood, it was starting level 50, For new classes, Shadowbringers, it was 60 starting level. Endwalker, it was 70. Now with Dawntrail, it's 80. And again, while it is a bit overwhelming to start at a high level off rip and have to learn these classes, learn your skills and everything like that, there's nothing saying that you have to do current level content with that new class. There is nothing telling you to. There's nothing forcing you to do that. You can go to an older dungeon, especially now with the whole trust system. You can go into an older dungeon with NPC party members, and you can use that dungeon to learn the class. Or, and this is always a possibility too, you can use a training dummy. If you have difficulty learning a job, the training dummy exists for a reason. That's why there's training dummies located all around Eorzea and pretty much all around Final Fantasy XIV, like around the game, all throughout the game. There are training dummies that you can utilize to learn your class. Any new class you get a hold of. If you are intimidated about this class, or if you have questions about learning how to use the class or whatever, you have training dummies that can help you with that. That's why they were designed. So the excuse that I don't like starting off at a high level, or it's too overwhelming or too confusing having all these skills and not knowing how to use them, there's tools within the game to help you learn your class. The tools are there. You just got to utilize them. And even I'm guilty of not utilizing all the tools. I don't use training dummies nearly as much as I should. I started using them more now. I started using them more during Endwalker than I have in any previous expansion. In previous expansions, I hardly ever used. In fact, I didn't use training dummies. I barely ever touched them. But now I actually utilize them to practice my rotation. Hell, I might even use it like if I'm waiting for a dungeon to start. But mainly, I use training dummies to practice my rotations, to see if I can do something better or to figure out a rotation. I've used it for my Black Mage. It's come in very handy. I've used it for my Bard. I have used it for Samurai. I have used it for Reaper. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've used it for a lot of my damage classes to learn my rotation, to get better at my rotation, to get faster. I've used it for Dragoon. Again, the training dummy exists for a reason. So the excuse that, I quit playing because I hated how high level the new jobs start out at. I mean, granted, I hate it for you, but to me, that's not a good enough reason to quit when you have resources that can help you use the class even at a high level. All right. And here's the last comment. Oh, wow, that's stupid. The class feels amazing as it is. I kind of agree. There isn't much positionals to worry about. And once you take a little time to understand it, it's actually pretty simple to play. That right there. Once you take a little time to understand it, it's actually pretty simple to play. So much truth in that. It's true. The class is not hard. And as I said before, 4 of the positional skills out of the 6 are self-explanatory. It's in the name. If you just read, I promise you will figure it out. The issue is the also awful explanation for its skills. It's confusing at first, but doesn't take long to get the hang of it. I don't even agree that the explanation for the skills is awful, especially if you're looking at the skill description itself, which I've already shown you on this episode. I've already shown you myself. The skill description along with the name. Self-explanatory. So how is that awful explanation when the skill name for 4 of your directional skills tells you exactly where you need to be on the opponent? What more do you need? But again, I don't know. But yeah, that one right there. Pretty good article, and the comments were about what I expected. But yeah, again, I don't understand why people are hell bent on trying to ruin the class that has barely even scratched the surface of what it is. Like like I said, this class has only been out a week. We barely really seen what this class can even do, and more to the point, we need to see what this class can do in Savage content at the very least. At the very least, we need to see what this class is capable of doing in Savage raids. At least I personally want to see what this class can do in Savage content. Like, let us get one Savage raid in with this class, or a couple of raids in with this class in Savage content, and I feel like from there we should be able to properly gauge the class, or at least have a better idea of how to gauge the class. But trying to gauge it right now is very preactive. It's overreactive, really, and it doesn't lend itself well to things going forward. Because if we're going to be this reactionary this soon, what's to stop developers from getting reactionary with other content in the game later on just because a vocal minority complains? Like, I honestly wish Yoshi P would have just said, look, the class has only been out for a week. Give it a chance. I mean, and more to the point, we've had content creators try the game out. We've had content creators try the class out. I don't recall any content creator on YouTube that has actually tried the class complain about the positionals. Now, I would mention Zeno, but we all know, at least those of us who are familiar with Zeno and his content, we all know that he is a tank main first and foremost. He doesn't really play DPS, and he admitted off rip that he had no idea what he was doing when he played Viper. He was just pressing whatever button glowed. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, he's a tank main. But to those of us who do play DPS and are familiar with positional type character classes, um, or positional job classes, I don't recall anybody complaining about the positionals on Viper. It wasn't a topic that I personally recall coming up in conversation. But now you got a vocal minority saying, "Nah, we don't like them." And I say to that vocal minority, get good, learn the class like the rest of us, or play a different class. That's pretty much all I can say on that one. Either learn the class and play it as it is intended to be played, or play a different class. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Hell, the class doesn't get any simpler than what it is. The skills are properly labeled. They tell you where you need to be just in the name. Uh, yeah, there's nothing else I can say on that. I have nothing else further to add on that. I pretty much said everything I can possibly say in regards to the Viper and how its skills are labeled. I've shown examples. I've literally shown in game what the names of the skills are, how simple it is to understand where you need to be positioned based on the name of four of its six positional skills. I even showed an example of how you can place your skill, two of those skills on your skill bar if you use controller. So again, if you use controller, I've already shown you where you can place two of your skills to help you identify where you should position your character to perform those skills. And that's for the two skills that aren't clearly labeled based on the name of the skill. But the other four skills, they are labeled. The name of the skill tells you where you need to be. But the two skills that aren't labeled as such, I've shown you in game where you can position your character. So there's no reason why you can't figure Viper out, especially when I've actually gone out of my way to show you. If you can't figure Viper out, then you need to play a different class. But don't sit there and complain about the class and have the class changed to suit your playstyle just because you don't want to take time to learn the class. That's not fair to the rest of us who actually do like the class as is and actually understand the class, or at least understand basic comprehension. So to the vocal minority, figure it out. Read. It's not rocket science. But yeah, I just want to talk about that because, like I said, that was a subject that really that caught my eye. So I definitely wanted to go ahead and talk about that and really dive into that. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it. And yeah, I appreciate y'all tuning into this episode. Again, it was kind of a short one. Hopefully, I will have longer episodes when I, actually have more subjects that I can dive into. But until then, I'll just kind of keep them short and sweet, and find subjects that just really strike me. Like I said, this one was kind of an important one because, like I said, this is a game that I really do love. I want to see this game thrive. I want to see this game continue to grow, but I also don't want to see a bunch of stupid shit like this. I don't want to see a vocal minority of my community just come in and try to ruin characters just because they don't like the way they play. I didn't like the way Monk played when I first started playing this game 8 years ago. I didn't like the fact that it had so many positionals. Guess what? I stopped playing Monk. And then years later, I came back and started playing Monk and actually decided to learn positionals. I had to do the same thing with Dragoon. It has positionals. I had to learn them. That's what you do when you want to learn a class and play a class effectively. You learn how the class plays. You don't sit there and bitch and complain and ask that the class be changed to suit your needs. You learn the class. But that's all I got for you. That's my 2 cents. A little bit of a rant mixed in there, but I had to get that off my chest and just say what I thought. So appreciate y'all tuning in for it. And tomorrow it's game time. So until then, y'all have a good night and I'll catch y'all tomorrow. Peace out.